Welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It is TJ, your host, and we are now covering what I call a reflection of the last 14 items that were listed, taken from the Paul Babiak and Robert Hare, Ph.D. book, Snakes in Suits, When Psychopaths Go to Work. And yes, throughout the other episodes I've exchanged sociopaths, cluster Bs, monsters, creatures. The point is they're all part of a cluster B, which means usually the major points apply to any or all of the labels when it comes to the details we're covering and the way to deal with such wonderful creatures. So I'm just going to go through the list. Now the authors do have some little excerpts and pieces in between, which I'll cover some of those as well to reiterate parts of each of the 14. So this may be a few episodes because we don't want to have an hour-long video. But when we go to number 1, it was to learn all you can about, they say, psychopathy. And they talk about the different traits and characteristics, which that's what YouTube is for. You can learn all you can from many different YouTube channels, which that's where I first started discovering these things, and I would find helpful pieces in many. Some people had different styles than others. They may cover the same subject, but I just don't get it from one, but I do from the other, so it's nice to have such a variety to choose from. But yes, learn all you can about this disorder, because many of us didn't even know there was a word or several words for this type of behavior. We just thought we got involved with the wrong person and our situation was unique and would never happen again. But that's not, or little did we realize that's not the case. In fact, you can get 10 targets of these cluster Bs in a room and they could all tell their story and it might be the very same story. It's very likely to be very similar. So yes, I agree with the number 1. Yes, you should learn all you can. And then number 2 is a touchy one, because I've broken it before. It says, avoid labeling someone a sociopath, psychopath, whatever name, and they're telling you not to do it, which I know if you've been involved with someone who did these things and then you finally looked it up and found a label for it, you'll be tempted to call them up and say, you are a psychopath, or some kind of name, and it's not advisable to do this. And from personal experience, I've learned it doesn't do you any good. It's not like you're going to say that to them and they're going to magically explode and say, oh, you figured me out, and disappear into the ground like the Wicked Witch. It just won't happen. They will simply say, you are, or I am not, or that's ridiculous, or something, but they won't do what you're expecting or wanting, which is for them to turn red and flushed, you figured me out, because they don't do that stuff. Sure, they know you figured them out, but they won't tell you that, but they'll get you back in some other way. There's a little part in here, it says, a few trees do not a forest make. And they're stating not to make the mistake of turning one or two characteristics or symptoms into a general personality assessment or diagnosis, which is back to, you are a psychopath. It's not advisable. For example, they say, he's impulsive, short-tempered, and nasty. He must be a psychopath. Wrong, wrong, wrong. The careless use of the term is very common in personal disputes. If you don't like somebody, or if the person's seen as a threat or a competitor or not meeting your needs, you may want to call them, he's a psychopath, which, again, is not effective. In fact, you'll probably sound foolish to the people hearing you, and they'll think you've got something wrong. And then they're telling you to keep in mind, only a qualified professional would be able to use the term after having strong evidence and a heavy dose of the defining features. And even then, judiciously, whatever. And then number 3, which is a good idea as well, learn all you can about yourself, because these types of people are like well trained in picking out certain aspects of personalities in general, which means they don't have to know you personally. They can observe a few tactics of yours and already have a file in their brain built of, say, 20 targets already that display that exact behavior, that all turned out to be a certain way or have a certain thing about them. They may just need to see you in action and immediately know things about you that maybe you don't even think about or even realize, but they will. So that's why they tell you to learn all you can about yourself and be aware of certain behaviors you may do all the time, which maybe aren't advisable, such as telling every single thing that happened in your life. You meet a stranger and think, oh, it's safe, it's a stranger. Oh, my husband beat me and tied me up, and he threatened me with this and that. Well, if the new person you're meeting happens to be someone who does that very type of thing, he will probably be like, oh, you poor dear, oh, and try to win you over so he can get you to the point where he can do the same thing. So it's best to keep that stuff to yourself. And then number 4 was to understand your own utility. Like, for example, if you're a rich older guy and you've got this young 16-year-old teenage girl who is in love with you and wants to be with you, and you just happen to be letting her live with you and use your money and your food and your belongings, and she seems kind of sick, well, you may assess the situation and think, well, maybe she's just here for my home. It's very possible she'd never tell you that, of course. That's what you have to realize, too. You might even say, honey, are you sure you're not just here because I'm giving you a home? And, of course, you'll hear, oh, no, how could you say that? And you'll think, oh, foolish me for even asking, which actually you were right on target. But it can be difficult, though. Their goals sometimes are not necessarily obvious. Like, maybe they don't have any, well, they don't have any real friends. We already know that. But maybe they want to have a friend, so they are using you to fill that role. With the psychopaths or the narcissists or the whatevers, they mention the most common types, which money, power, fame, sex. So, for example, this 16-year-old found a guy that's got lots of money. Well, of course, she could tell by the fancy car he drives, but she wouldn't dare say anything about that. She would just meet him, notice his car, and then eventually say, I really like you. And it may not even be real. And he may be like, wow, we only had a 30-minute conversation and she likes me? Oh, wow. And power, let's say you, during your conversation, say, oh, yes, I'm the president of this company. She'll be like, oh, power, And then fame, oh, I am #1 at my company, and I've got my face on billboards all over the world. Well, that could be a part. I mean, these are just a listing. And then the last one, sex. He puts out for her, and she likes it. So she thought, wow, I can have a regular sex buddy who's rich, powerful, and gives me sex, and he's famous. Oh, that's my lover. That could be what they're wanting. It could be any one of those or all of them or some of them. And it's difficult when you're involved with such a person, because if you were to say, are you sure you're not just here because I have a car you can use or something, because you know they won't admit to that. That's part of the game. Do not admit there's a game. So you're silly for thinking that. Can't you just accept that even though she met you yesterday, she really likes you for who you are? I suppose it's best to keep that to yourself, but just watch it. But you have to ask that question, what's this person really want from me? Because you know, if you've lived in real life and you've grown to love a person, you know what that's like. But if you meet someone and the next day they're like, I'm in love, you're thinking, yeah, right, how are you in love? you're in love with the idea of taking advantage of the things I have that you want, or something else. And they can't usually give you a good answer, which is a different topic. But number 5 is understand your hot buttons and weak spots. So this kind of dissects their method of manipulation. The hot buttons are those things that provide an automatic emotional reaction from you. Like, if you love dogs, and somebody comes in your home with a crate and they open it up and you see 10 little dogs, you're going to have an automatic, oh my goodness, look how cute, some kind of reaction. Well, that would be your hot buttons. And then hobbies, they mention, if there's something you really like or you're passionate about. But sometimes these people will press one of those hot buttons. Your attention may be diverted from more important things. What the authors are saying is that if they know one of these hot buttons and you're on some topic that they don't want to talk about, they may throw out something about the dog. Oh, I found 5 stray dogs that are looking for home. It diverts attention, and that can manipulate you. You could say, you brought that up to distract me from talking about this, but again, you'll be subject to gaslighting of, I don't know where you came up with that, which you actually probably hit the nail on the head. And they mention how the cluster B will press these buttons privately. The authors are stating that learning all you can about your hot buttons is the first defense against having them pushed unscrupulously. And then they talk about how it's far easier to become aware of your own hot buttons than to learn to control them. And they're telling you or advising you to check with your family or people you're close by to see if they can determine from their interactions with you what your hot button reactions are. And basically they're telling you to learn to control your reactions. So the dog one's kind of a simple example, but there can be other reactions that you don't want to do because it may put you in a vulnerable spot. And then, of course, this one I've experienced firsthand. Predators, they love to look into your weak spots. Like, for example, if you meet someone new and you're looking in the mirror and you're looking at your tummy, thinking, ooh, they're going to see that and think, ooh, the person's struggling with their weight, or thinks that they're overweight. Ooh, I'll use that. And then the next time they say, ooh, you look really thin tonight. Did you lose some weight? And of course, the person won't know that the psychopath noticed that thing in front of the mirror and just thinks, wow, he must think I look thin. Oh, let's go out. Well, they use those weak spots. Now, of course, the weak spots, which I've covered elsewhere, how at the beginning in the idealization, which they don't mention that here, which I thought I would tie in because it's very similar. It's kind of like saying the same thing in different words, but they do look at the flaws. Or if you are in front of the mirror and you're a lady putting makeup on and you've got a mole right here you just don't like, so you're like trying to paint over it, and think, can you see it now? And they're going to be like, well, what's wrong with it? I'd like to see it. Take that makeup off. And you'll then think, wow, the real me I've been trying to cover, he likes. Oh, I like this person. And that's one of the spells they cast on you. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be anything at all that they see you perceive as a flaw, and they'll immediately love it. It's sick. And they, of course, then, whether it's the discard stage, then they'll start using those things. You've got that ugly mole on your face, or something, and you'll be like, well, wait a second, you like the mole. And anyway, that's what they do. They're predators. So at the beginning, they want to convince you, they accept you for however you are. Any flaw you have, it's no flaw, it's a great thing to them. And that's how they get you into their cage, into their claws. But they're telling you, as authors, to look at what's missing in your life, and it's not a good idea to advertise that to the public, but sometimes it may be revealed without your knowledge. It may be just obvious. But they want you to have a realistic picture of your flaws to defend against manipulation. They're telling you it's easy for us to doubt our own abilities and decide we're some kind of failure and that we need something to fill the void. And many times one of these monsters will be glad to slip into that void and turn your life upside down for the worse. Now, there's a little excerpt in here stating, it's called Giving Them What They Deserve. They talk about grifters, which are well described in movies. Typically, they're portrayed as highly intelligent, creative individuals who target only greedy marks who deserve what happens to them. Their elaborate schemes make for good entertainment, almost a morality tale in which the grifter feels justified in using the mark's lascivious nature as a lever for the swindle. The grifter may be a rogue, but a charming one who otherwise is ethical and unlikely to swindle decent people. Now, the reality they're mentioning here is not so benign, that many of these grifters' victims are simply gullible, trusting, or naive, and they hardly deserve to lose their life savings to a charming rogue simply because they present weaknesses or vulnerabilities that can be exploited. And they state that Paul Newman's character in The Sting may be likable, but has few counterparts in the real world. And then we go to number 6, which tells you how to understand how these monsters manipulate others, which pretty much mirror the narcissist list, which the first one's assessment, which I suppose that's first for either or. It's not really part of the 3 stages. They assess first to make sure the person's worth their time. And then the second was impression management, which is basically the idealization, devaluation later, but then it leads to the abandonment, which is their third one. But they're telling you just to learn all you can, and don't be like I have been with some, where you right off the bat recognize a psychopathic trait and say, that's a psychopathic trait. It doesn't help you. But there's a excerpt here of powerful allies, and they're stating that crime is the result of a complex mix of socioeconomic and psychological factors, many of which are beyond the control of the individual. However, loopholes in the law, inconsistent judicial responses, fascination with the dark side of human nature, thinly disguised fascination with those who bend the rules or do it their way, and a curious tendency to rationalize even the most egregious misbehavior, also important reasons for the prevalence and tolerance of criminal behavior in our society. As a society, we tend to attribute the causes of an antisocial or criminal act to outside forces than to choices an individual makes. Indeed, this diffusion of responsibility is big business. Witness the large number of psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, counselors, ready and eager to explain criminal behaviors. This is good for criminals in general and for psychopaths in particular. The latter make effective use of the belief that everyone is good at heart, only needs a chance, and is capable of genuine reform. Perhaps this is why so many of those in helping professions find themselves in big trouble by trying to help such a psychopath. As one psychopath put it, I love do-gooders because they do me so much good.
I asked the surgeon to move it. I think it looks much better here. What do you think?
So you say I can dish it out, but I can't take it. I have to tell you, you're probably right, which in real life I would never tell you that you're right, but I can tell you here. Yeah. When we lived together, and I announced to you that I'd be gone all night, and I didn't bother to ask you to go with me, it's because I was courting my latest target, and I didn't need you there to interfere. So I just told you I was gonna go out with some girlfriends, which you later found out it wasn't a girlfriend at all. Well, you didn't need to know as far as I was concerned, because I was getting ready to discard you. What good would it do to tell you that? Except cause problems for me. Couldn't have that. Well, I happened to notice like a week later. The night you must have decided to pay me back, and you went out and never came back. Well, I called your parents. I pretended to be concerned and worried. I couldn't just let you get away with spending the night, even though I did. Not the same. I'm allowed to. You're not. So, I called your parents and told them I was worried that you hadn't come home. So at least they would know what you're up to, since I couldn't control you. I still need to get you back for that.